Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you all had a great week and I hope you're ready for more photography fun. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now this show is my way to helping fellow photographers to keep moving forward with their photography journey, and it's something that I've been doing for several years now. Now, how you can join us? It's really simple. All you need to do is to join our Clever Photographer Plus membership, and you can find out more about it on our website at cleverphotographer.com/membership. By joining the membership, you will get access to this photography review show, and you will also get access to a monthly digital photography bundle full of incredible tools, including overlays, presets, textures, backgrounds, custom brushes, and everything that you can imagine, always wrapped in a certain photography style. So for example, right now, this month, the theme of the bundle is landscape photography. So again, if you want to learn more about it and join me for the next show, just head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership. Now, in this show, what we do, we look at your images and we always look at it from three different points of view. First one, we look at the camera settings. This is where I jump into the raw files or the files, look at things like your camera, lens, ISO, shutter speed, and so on. After that, I also look at the image and look for noise, exposure, sharpness, and other important parts of your image. Once we're done with that, then we look at the artistic part of the photo. This is where we look at things like composition, we look at the main subject, storytelling, and everything to do with that aesthetic part and basically the way the image looks. And finally, if there is a space and I think there is a benefit to do that, I usually look at the photo editing and I give you some tips and tricks on what you could do differently in the future. Now, when it comes to editing, we do use Luminar Neo on this show simply because our channel is about Luminar Neo and we are massive fans of this software. However, don't worry if you don't have it. You can always use the tips in any other similar photo editing application. Now, this is all out of the way, so you know how to join us with your own photos. You know what we're gonna do. So let's go ahead, jump into it, and start by looking at your images. Now, today we have photos from two photographers. We have images from Elizabeth and her landscape captures, and then we also have a mix of images from Tony. So let's jump straight to it and start with the photos from Elizabeth. We have 4 of them, so we're gonna start with the first one right here. Elizabeth, let's start from the top with the camera settings and the camera capturing part of the photo. Looking at it, you captured this with Canon RP and the lens was Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. Now, when it comes to the camera settings, ISO 100, 42 millimeters, f6.3 and 1/250th of a second. When it comes to the camera settings, nice and low ISO, very important for landscape photography. f6.3, great value for specifically this type where you're using quite wide view, and even with f6.3, you will get details all the way through. And looking at the image, 1/250th of a second, giving you really nice exposure across. There is nothing that is overexposed or too dark, so everything looks good from that point of view. Now, after that, we're gonna zoom in a little bit, maybe to somewhere around 100%. And as I move around, I'm looking for sharpness, which in overall looks very good. Again, coming back to my point of the f6.3, you can see how you have sharpness all the way in front, as well as all the way at the back on the mountains there. So that all looks very good. Now, talking about noise, when I zoom around and look around, everything looks good there too. So in overall, the camera settings and that part of your image is very good. Now, this brings us nicely into the artistic part where we're talking about the image itself and the composition. And actually, there is lots of nice things around it. So for example, the foreground, middle ground, and background, also the texture in the sky. The overall light is quite bright, but it kind of matches the scene, and I think it works very well. Also, I really enjoy the panoramic crop. I think that also looks really, really well. So altogether, it's a very, very lovely picture. I really like that. I like the contrast between the colors, the fact that you have the green in the foreground, orange in the middle ground, and then the kind of darker, moody colors at the back really works together and create lovely scene. When it comes to post-processing, there is actually not much I would do here. Everything looks good to me. So all in all, as I bet, this picture is very, very good. Moving forward, let's move from this sunshine into a little more moody capture. Now, this I really enjoy. There is lots of nice things happening here. I love the drama. I love the light, the overall feel, that kind of monotone feel. All of that works really well. So right away, the first impression, I really enjoy the image. Looking into the camera settings, I can see that you captured this with your mobile phone, with the Samsung, which is perfectly fine. From the camera settings itself, generally, they are a little bit different than you would have them on your DSLR or mirrorless camera. So I don't always pay too much attention to it, but still, let's go through it. ISO 12, 6.4 millimeters on the lens, f1.8 and 1/2000 of a second. Now looking at the image, let's go ahead and zoom in again a little bit, looking for the sharpness, which to be honest, for the low light situation, you capture it in. And for the mobile phone capture, I think it looks very good. The sharpness is there. You can see the details. You can see the details on the water as well as on the mountain. So all of this looks very good. Now, like often with the mobile phones, I can see some noise in the image, especially in the darker parts. Often with mobile phones, you will get the two type of noise. You will get the noise which looks a little bit like grain, which is more visible in this part. And you also get this color noise, which gives you this kind of color patches around the image. You can see this green and purple around. And both of them is something that can be to some degree helped with during the post-processing. So we come to that in a moment. However, again, great light. So lovely exposure, the contrast between the dark and bright. Very decent sharpness for the capture with the mobile phone. Noise, not too heavy, something that we can fix in a moment. So in all the camera settings and the overall capturing of the image is well done. Now that brings us to the artistic part, and I really like this image. Again, some stuff I already mentioned, the contrast of the sky between the darker areas and brighter areas is excellent. The depth also is really lovely with the really nice leading line build up with that lake and navigating the eyes towards the middle of the image. The scene is nicely balanced with the mountains on either side. So all of this works really, really well, and it creates very nice, interesting and dramatic scene. Just like with the first image, I really enjoy the panoramic crop here. I think it can work very well, especially with the lake. It really creates nice scene and it really balances everything together. So I love the image, really, really nicely captured. Lots of nice stuff done there with the capturing as well as the composition. When it comes to the post-processing, as I mentioned already, let's zoom in a little bit and see if we can help just a bit. Let's go ahead and jump into the develop tool where we can see our noise reduction tab. And here, let's start with the color noise reduction. So we're going to do that. We're going to increase it and it will take a time and try to remove some of it. And then definitely we're going to apply some luminosity. And I think probably somewhere around 60, maybe 60 is too strong. So let's go for 40. Now, when we zoom out, by adding that much luminosity and color on a noise reduction, we're going to start to lose some details. So the workaround with it is to open the sharpness tab and then return into the noise reduction and note the value on our luminosity slider. So in this case, we have luminosity on 40. Now the next thing to do is to imagine number 100 and minus it with the luminosity value. So we have 100 minus 40 and the result is 60. So that's how much we're going to add into our sharpening slider. However, to make sure that we don't reintroduce the noise into areas which don't necessarily have a texture. We're going to use masking for that. And what we're going to do, we're going to take the masking slider and bring it up to somewhere around 60 or 70. What that does, it basically just makes sure that the sharpening is only applied to the areas that have an edge, textures, and sharpness in it. So with that being done, we have taken care of the noise. Everything else looks brilliant. So all in all, I really enjoyed this photo. Well done, Elizabeth. Now, moving to another image. I wonder if it's a similar area. It could be easily. However, still looking at it, obviously it's a different feel. The light isn't that interesting. There is a stuff which is nicely done on it and some stuff which don't necessarily work right away. My first impression is, obviously there are the people there which helps, but there is just lots of different things happening. And in overall, it's not such an interesting subject as the first one. But again, let's jump quickly into the camera details and start with that. So ISO 40, 7.9 millimeters, f2.4, 1/1000 of a second, again captured with the Samsung mobile phone. So camera settings, good. Now, when we're talking about sharpness, when we zoom in, you can see that obviously this is where we start to hit the limitation of the mobile phone and of the equipment, because once you really zoom in, you will see how we're starting to get really pixelated on the people, and it starts to all blend together, creating that kind of watercolor effect. Now, once we already here, you can also notice the noise at the back, which is a little bit stronger. And to be honest, often when there is this kind of mist, clouds and fog, the noise really stand out from it a lot. Especially when you try to edit the image and push it around, it will really appear a lot from there. So in overall, I think this is maybe a capture where the mobile phone is starting to be limiting itself or starting to have a limiting capabilities, because it's really complex scene with different light, different depth, different effects, different elements on the image. So that's maybe just what it is. Moving to the storytelling and the artistic part of the image, I think maybe what we need to start with is different cropping. So I think first thing you need to focus on and understand is what is it you're trying to show. Is it the people? Is it the mountain behind? Is the mountain on the sides? Is it the water? What is it that you're trying to show? If we're thinking about the people, then we need to crop it much more tighter, because that will be our main focus. If we're thinking about the mountains at the back, it would be difficult on this image because they are so misty that compared to the red and orange on the people, the mountain will always be hidden behind them. It will be difficult to add attention to the mountain over these contrasting colors. And if it's the mountains on the side, we would again have to crop it all together differently. So since we're talking about cropping, let's actually take the image and bring it into edit module. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna be focusing on the people. Because of the contrast, because of the subject, and because of the background, I think it's the best solution for this image. What we're gonna do, we're gonna jump into the cropping. And I think the first thing we need to do is to adjust a little bit the crop. If you want to use this panoramic crop that works very well on this scene, I would go for something like 16:9 to start with. Now, by doing that, we're already losing parts of the image. But this is, again, the reminder with a good old saying that if specific part of the image doesn't add anything to the composition, it doesn't necessarily need to be there. So right here, what we're going to do, we're going to adjust the position of the crop. And even furthermore, we're going to make it a little bit smaller. And by doing that, we will actually use the rule of thirds lines. And you will see where they meet at something what we call golden points. So we will position the golden points over the two set of people. And once done with it, we're just going to hit enter and everything will nicely adjust for us. Looking at it, it looks much better. We have much more clear subject on our image. But there is one more thing we can do, and that's to make it a little bit less flat. If you look at the water, if you look at the top of the image, it has pretty much the same color, same brightness, everything looks same. So again, it's missing a little bit of extra touch. And we can do that with local adjustments. We can do a dodge and burn, or we can do a simple gradient. So what I would do in this case, I would jump into the develop tool, bring the exposure down a little bit somewhere around here, and then go into the masking and use the linear gradient tool. By this, we're going to create gradient at the bottom, which will basically just make the bottom of the image darker. Now, when we go back to the adjustments, we can then take the exposure slider and bring it down even further. And furthermore, we can do exactly the same for the top of the image. So again, exposure down somewhere around here, masking, linear gradient, drag it from there and end up somewhere around here. Close it and we are done. So now when we look at the before and after, with the gradients, we're getting a little bit more attention towards the center, and with the crop, everything looks a little bit more balanced and the main subject is much more clear. So that's for this image. Let's go back and finish with the fourth image, Elizabeth. Let's have a look at it, what we got there. And I have to say, first impression, I really like it. For me, this is again, really my favorite style when you have the mixture of the greens, mountains, the dramatic sky where there's a mixture of the blue and contrast of the different colors and brightness. I think all of that works really well together. So let's start from the camera settings. Canon RP with the Tamron 28 to 300 millimeters. When it comes to the ISO, 250, 53 millimeters, f13 and 1/500 of a second. So you know about the goal for the ISO as low as possible. So always try to stick to 100. However, obviously, depending on the conditions and location, you maybe have to adjust it a little bit. f13 to make sure that you have a sharpness and details all the way through, so good there. And 1/500 of the second, giving you quite nice exposure across the image. Now, let's look at the sharpness and noise. So for that, we're going to zoom in a little bit, let's say somewhere about 100%. And looking at the image, looking at this specific bottom part of the image, you can see that it's a little bit soft. It doesn't have that usual sharpness from some of the previous images. You can see that it's a little bit shaky. I wonder if maybe the camera moved just a little bit, or maybe there was a wind, so the plants were moving. However, it's missing a little bit of a sharpness there. On the top of it, when I zoom in even further, you can see quite lots of noise on the mountains, which looking at the ISO, is a little bit strange. So I think maybe what happened, maybe the light was a little bit darker, maybe the image was a little bit darker, and you had to open it up, maybe with opening shadows or brightness, and this is the result you ended up with. Now again, like we did with the previous image, you can try to remove the noise using the noise reduction tool, and then end up with maybe a little better result on the noise there. When it comes to the artistic part, again, as I mentioned, there is lots of stuff I like on it. I like the color contrast between the green areas, between the natural colors and the sky. I already mentioned the framing. So this kind of V-shape opening a view for the mountains, I think works really well on landscape photography. Again, the contrast in the sky of the blue and also of the dark and bright areas add really nice drama to the image and really make it stand out. So all in all, I think it's a lovely photo, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for sending it over. I really, really enjoy it. So out of the four, I think this one is my favorite. I love everything about it. The contrast, the drama, the colors, that feel of the image. I think all of that works really, really well. So well done, Elizabeth. Thank you again for sending your images over, and make sure that you send more images to us in the near future. Now, moving on to the next photographer, it's time to look at the captures from Tony. Tony, 5 images from you this week. So let's start with the landscape capture all the way at the end. Let's make it nice and large so we can look at it. And then we're going to start by looking at the camera details. So on this one, ISO 100, 29 millimeters, f8, 1/250th of a second. So from the camera settings, everything perfect there, nice and low ISO, f8 giving you a really nice depth of field with the sharpness all the way through, and 1/250th of a second giving you nice exposure for that time of the day. Now, looking at the overall feel of the image, let's zoom in and have a look. I think it's missing a little bit of the pinpoint sharpness on it. You can see there is a tiny bit of movement. I don't know if you can see it when I zoom in. You can see how the texture isn't exactly standing out. And you can also see it a little bit on the people. They are just tiny bit blurry. Now, two different things that it could be caused by one of them, just a slight movement of the camera, which can be fixed with little higher shutter speed. Or the second one, obviously, is the area where the camera is focusing. Just always make sure for this type of picture that you're focusing somewhere in the middle of the scene, in the middle of the depth of the scene. So in this case, probably these rocks right here. So that would be for that. Noise is very little, so that is all good there. So all in all, technically very well handled. When it comes to the artistic part and the composition, I think it looks really good. I am quite happy with the fact that the whole castle is there. I think the framing is really nice too. Gives you really nice foreground here at the bottom. Gives you nice background of the castle itself. The whole cropping looks very good as well. So everything is good there. We have a clear subject. You clearly know what you're trying to show. I think the contrast between the different colors works very well. So I think it's really nice. Now, few things that you could do if you would really want to push the creativity. Obviously, you could swap the sky, still to blue sky, but maybe with a little bit more texture in it. You could also try to use some of the tools to remove the people from the image. On this image, with the people being so small, you could probably remove most of them using like a gen erase or erase tool. That would be another thing. And then you could really push it around and maybe adjust the colors. So those are the things you could do to make it even more creative. However, I appreciate the natural result with lots of right things and just really, really nice photo. So well done, Tony. Now, after that will brings us to 4 still light captures or nature captures. So let's jump straight to them. Now, starting with this one, I am not the greatest fan of spiders or snakes actually, but on this picture, obviously, we missing the camera settings, so let's just talk about it in overall. One thing to keep an eye on, Tony, is just these edges. You see a little darker area here, which I would try to remove just to remove the distraction from the photo. I think looking at it, it was probably captured through the glass, so you can see a little bit of some of the reflection there. But in overall, actually, the result is quite nice. The sharpness, the depth, a little bit of the bokeh effect, all that works and looks very good. That warm feel and the warm style on the image works very well too. So all in all, it's a lovely capture, very creative capture for the spider. So well done. That brings us to the second image, which is this cactus, I guess, or some form of plant like this, which is very interesting. I really like the combination of the textures and the depth. Creates a really, really nice capture. Everything looks good there. All the camera settings with the nice low ISO creates really nice scene. Little bit of the light creating just tiny bit of shadows and very kind of diffuse shadows around. And I think that creates a really, really nice look. So all of that works really well. If I have to be honest, for my personal liking, I'm not the greatest fan of it. And I think it's to do with the colors. I think this kind of gray, brown, orange colors. It's just, it makes the image a little bit flat and not that as appealing. However, that is very much my own personal view of the image or my liking. That has nothing to do with how it's been captured, because I think it's very, very interesting. Now, one thing you could do, you could be really even further creative, even further, and crop it even further. So that way you could, for example, go for something like the 16:9 and maybe end up just with something like this, or maybe just the top. Depends what you would like to create. So let's go for something like this. And you would end up with something like this. So that could be also quite interesting. Coming back to your images, then coming and looking at this image right here. Now, this I think is definitely your highlight of the talent. You're really good at these type of pictures, of the color contrast, the depth, the sharpness on it. I'm always amazed by the result, and I have to say again, I love this image. My first impression, definitely great. Now, one thing which is a little bit unusual on your captures, and that's the amount of noise at the background. Now, this could be caused by many different things. ISO 400 shouldn't really give you that much, but it could be part of it. Then maybe the background was a little bit darker, or the light was a little bit lower. So when you pushed it by opening shadows or adding exposure, that noise appeared. Either way, it's a little bit visible, and it's even more visible because it's that kind of color contrast, color noise. So you can see that kind of reds there, and it's maybe something you want to look at. different things you could do. Obviously, you could try to apply some of the noise reduction, traditional or using the AI, or you could make the background a little bit darker. Very simply, if I just go maybe somewhere around here, you could basically just kind of brush it around and hide a little bit of the noise using the brush. So I think just something like this. Once we close it, that is already a little bit better. So great capture, love the contrast, everything works super well there, so well done. Just the noise, something to keep an eye on for the future. And finally, the final capture of the shoes here, a little bit more of a fun capture, obviously, with playful idea with the shoes and the plants in them. Yeah, the overall scene is nice. If I would have to be picky, I would probably prefer this plant not to be there, not to distract the scene. Again, the depth is nice, the colors are nice, but it's not necessarily the most fine art capture you're going to find. If you would really want to push it, one thing you could do, for example, is to turn it into black and white and just let the purple stand out, or maybe purple and green, you know, different things you can do. We would have to go into the saturation and basically just take away some of these colors. Let's have a look if we bring the purple back. Yep, and then take away the orange and red and yellow, and you would end up with something like this, which would maybe create another whole level of interesting capture with like stronger vignette, something like this. You could end up with something interesting like this. So, Tony, just a little bit of fun. I hope that you don't take it too seriously. Great pictures, love the landscape, love the flowers. My favorite is probably this one for this year, so well done. Not this year, this week, so well done. Thank you for sending your images over. As always, my pleasure to review them for you. And if you have more, make sure you send them for one of the future episodes. Now, that brings us nicely to the point that now next week, I'm actually part of the movie production here in England, where I'm going to be flying drone and I'm going to be doing behind the scenes shots. So unfortunately, I will not be here. And then I'm going to Scotland for 10 days for a massive workshop. We're going to be traveling from Edinburgh to Glencoe to Fort Williams to Harry Potter Bridge to Isle of Skye, doing massive amount of landscape photography. If you're interested in landscape photography, keep an eye on my social media accounts. I will be sharing lots of tips from there. And to finish it off, if you available this Friday, me and Jim Nix and Vanelli, two giants of Luminar Neo photography, we will meet together and giving you tips on travel photography. If you're interested in that, join us for free. I will link the link to this workshop or the webinar to this video. If not, then you can also find it on my social media accounts. Really, join us for that 1 hour, 3 photographers talking about travel photography tips. Among stuff, we have traveled big part of the world, and I think it's going to be a lots of fun. Guys, thank you for watching if you're watching live, and thank you for watching on replay. I hope to see you next time. Until then, take care, stay safe, and bye-bye.